why did you come to Korea? Why did you leave China? What motivated you to leave China and come to Korea?
One of the most important reasons is that in China, there is no freedom of religion, and belief in God is persecuted. If I continue to believe in God in China, I would be incarcerated or even tortured to death. So I had to leave China. South Korea is a democratic country and is very close to China. It was my first choice to escape China for survival. That is why I fled to South Korea.
I understand. And when you joined the church in 2004, when did you realize that there is no religious freedom in China? And how did you realize this? How did you experience this?
I myself used to be a lawyer, and sometimes I represented religious cases. At that time, I could only represent those cases according to the orders of the government. I could not truly protect my clients, and I could not respect their freedom. It was through my work that I gradually realized in China there's no freedom of religion, and their religious beliefs are subjected to repression and persecution. When I was representing their cases, I knew that my clients only practiced their religion and didn't do any bad things. But I had to say what the government told me to say and label the charge of disturbing social order on them. I had to plead them guilty and ask them to cop a plea. If they refused to forsake their faith, they would most certainly be sentenced to prison. After I joined the church in 2004, I started to have meetings with my brothers and sisters, where we fellowshipped about our understanding of God's words and how to cast off our corrupt disposition. But I often heard news of the arrests of my brothers and sisters. My family used to host brothers and sisters, and so my family was monitored by the government, and we had to move house 3 times. As I came to know more about house churches in China, I learned that it is not just the Church of Almighty God that is targeted. Other house churches are also persecuted. And now the persecution has aggravated. Even the 3 self-churches authorized by the government cannot put up crosses. Pastors there must preach according to the government's order. If they fail to do so, they will also be persecuted. So it's not the case that the 3 self-churches are free from persecution as most people tend to believe. They are also persecuted.
How many Christians in China belong to the non-official category? How many of them are persecuted?
I don't know the exact number because there are too many.
Okay. And you said that you had to move house 3 times, right?
Yes.
This was one of the reasons because of persecution.
Yes.
And it was because of the neighbors. The neighbors have been instructed to spy on you or monitor you. That was the reason?
This is only one of the reasons. Some brothers and sisters who had meetings in our house were arrested. If the police obtained the video footage of the surveillance cameras, they could find us as well. And that would lead to the arrest of me and my family members. So we had to move.
And what about your own family members? Your parents, your husband? What about them? How did they react?
Both my parents also believe in Almighty God. My father was a civil servant and a Communist Party member. There's no freedom of religion in China, so it was impossible for my father to believe in God freely. He had to attend the meetings, read God's words, and pray secretly. Otherwise, he would lose his job and be arrested. So on the one hand, my father wanted to continue his belief in God. On the other hand, he also cared about his personal safety. What's more, My mother had been arrested and later released. In order to avoid being arrested again, she was hiding away from home. Due to the huge psychological pressure and the pain of not being able to reunite with his wife, my father committed suicide. My mom was arrested while preaching the gospel in December 2012. She told me that after she was arrested, she was forced to sign statements renouncing her faith in God. But she didn't sign them because she didn't want to betray God. The CCP could not accuse her of anything. They released her because they wanted to identify more brothers and sisters through her contacts with them, even better, contacts with the leaders, so that they can arrest more people. So after 15 days of incarceration, she was released, but was not able to come back home. In order to avoid being monitored, she has to hide in other places. I have not seen her for 5 years.
You have heard nothing since 5 years.
Yes.
And have you been arrested sometime?
I have not been arrested before, but after my mom was released, the police visited our house trying to find my mom. They even asked my neighbors about my family. Later, both my father and I heard unusual noises while making phone calls. We suspected that our phone calls were monitored, so we had to stop our church life. We did not dare to contact our brothers and sisters. My mother left home for fear of being arrested again. 2 months later, my father committed suicide. The leaders at my workplace warned me not to believe in God anymore, or else the consequences would be severe. Later, I also left my home and hid in my brothers and sisters' house for 10 months. At last, in order to avoid being arrested, I fled abroad.
What would you like to say to the European people? Because we are representing Europe here. We are representing 9 human rights organizations. What would you like to say to us?
I want to say that because the Chinese government used diplomacy and money to exert pressure on the South Korean government, the South Korean government cannot properly protect the Christians from mainland China. We hope to receive support from the European states, especially the European NGOs. We hope that more human rights organizations in Europe could tell the world about the story of the persecution we suffer, so that the Chinese Christians in South Korea can receive help and protection.
We will share this, we'll pass this on to them. And, okay. Then I have one more question. What is your hope? I understand that you came to South Korea and even left your family because you are seeking religious freedom. I understand. But say, if now the Chinese government would decide to grant religious freedom and stop persecuting believers, say there would be such a miracle, would you go back to China?
Sure. I would love to return to my hometown.
My final question. What is your hope for the future?
My future hope is that I can follow the teachings of God, become a true person, a real human being, and divest myself of all the corrupt disposition.
Thank you very much. This is a very good message to close the interview. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you.